and I am from San Francisco. I'm the founder and the executive director of a program called MeWater Foundation. So MeWater Foundation takes youth and their families from underserved communities out into Mother Nature, whether that be through surfing, camping. We do a lot of overnight camping and surfing experiences. And the whole purpose of it is to expose the youth to the magic of all of it, every aspect of it. We open up the canvas for the youth and their families. So if we go to the beach, it's essentially we're opening up the canvas and they're doing their art. They're having their own experience based on whatever it is that they're feeling in the moment. I'm going to talk a lot about story today because the purpose of me being here is to talk about brands, connecting with brands. But based on things that I heard yesterday and that I've kind of gathered, I also think it'll be important to also speak to those in the room that maybe when you talk about brand, it's just like up here, and you're more concerned with how am I going to do the work, how am I going to get any sort of funding, how am I going to make this happen? So all of this for me started in my garage, but I'm going to go a little bit more back and tell you a little bit about the story. So in 2015, MeWater started doing work legally. Previous to that, it wasn't legal from like a liabilities perspective. I worked in residential treatment in San Francisco for 22 years. If you don't have an understanding of what residential treatment is, it's for kids who have been removed from their homes due to severe neglect, trauma, most often due to their environment, not necessarily like juveniles, but plenty of juveniles within that system. The level that I worked at, the state of California, there's levels to it. I worked in level 14, which is essentially just a step down from incarceration or psychiatric hospitalization. So super intense stuff. I started there as a counselor, and by the time I left, 22 years later, I was the director of operations. So I put in a lot of work into that work, and it still carries. It's the essence of what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. During the course of that time, at one point during my little tenure there, or my not little tenure, I ran the recreation department, and we were taking kids off the grid, camping, absolute wilderness, and maybe taking some kids surfing as well. And I just was able to see the immediate impact that the water and nature had on these kids. So fast forward a few years, and I was going through some, I guess you would call political stuff within an agency. Imagine that in the nonprofit world. And I didn't know if I was going to stay or get let go or whatever it was going to be. And so I just said, I'm going to start my own thing. I'm going to start this nonprofit. I'm going to take kids surfing, and it's going to be, my assumptions were that it was going to be easy to get funding, that I was just, that I was going to write some grants, I was going to do this and that, and it was all going to be, I can't swear because I'm being recorded, but it was all going to be magic, right? It was all going to happen. So let's just say that it didn't all happen as I planned. I made assumptions which I've learned really not to make. During my course of the work that I did at a place called Edgewood, I had extensive training in trauma-informed care, which we were just talking about. And I ended up being a lead trainer and training it throughout San Francisco County with like partner agencies, and that shifted my perspective immensely about not just the work with the kids and the families, but also my personal life, to be honest, the way that I operate, the way that I look at things. And with MeWater, we apply all the principles of trauma-informed care into our program model through the way that we speak with the youth, speak to the families, look at the youth, our volunteers. So we're also a volunteer-based program. We're a very small team. And if you don't know a lot about trauma-informed care, I just want to share with you just one perspective of it that's kind of simplified. And that's it. That's instead of looking at others with a lens of like, and we all do this, right? And what's wrong with this person or this situation, and rather looking at it and trying to understand kind of what's going on here, like what happened. And this is going to go back to the word that we're going to talk a lot about today, is what's the story, right? So we're looking at it through curiosity as opposed to judgment. And that seems simple, but it's, in life it's actually not. So, but when you're working with kids and families, it is, with the population that we work with, it's incredibly important, right? That lack of judgment, that lack of, assumptions, oh, this or that, because of this, because that, all that stuff. You got to try and erase that stuff all from your operating system. So the trauma-informed care, the way that I look at it best as well, is that it's just integrated, and I'm not a tech person, so please, go easy on me, but it's integrated into my operating system, the way that I look at things. Okay, so I think that's really important because, and the families and the children feel that, right? They don't feel judged, and it's incredibly important. Another important part of my story is that I'm a white male leading an organization that primarily serves children and families of color. And I need to have sincere humility as I do this work, doing my best to understand, but most importantly to listen, right? Listening, learning, all of that is, in my position of leadership, is incredibly important. And I hold that humility in all aspects of the work that I'm doing. I don't want to say I do my best, but I really try, and I think it's really important. Part of my story is that I was raised by a single mother. My mother was an ESL teacher throughout my life, and not to sound kind of harsh, but I was exposed to a lot of giving through my mom throughout my entire, especially during my teenage years, when you realize kind of what's going on with your family. And my mom, I think I saw the downside of being such a giver, and so naturally in my life, I think I worked, or I didn't want to become that, and I'll tell you right now that I became that. I became every aspect of that. And also in my story, I had some childhood trauma through my mom's partner, and I think that's important. It's an important part of my story because I think it gave me a lens to be able to look at, especially the youth going through things that I was able to relate to in a way that of empathy, compassion, and wanting to help. But again, I turned into my mother in that sense, and it's all worked out. But it's a long story. I'm saying the word story a lot. There's some water here, because your story is like my story in all of this that I just shared with you is incredibly fucking important. Sorry, camera. It's incredibly important. It's incredibly important because it's made me who I am. It's the backbone of the why and what we're doing with the organization. It drives a lot of it, like my entire story, right? Now, I'm not trying to say that I'm the story, but my story is an important part of the story. I don't know if that makes sense, but and the story with the organization for us, it all starts, everything, and I really appreciated the Gnome Surf approach on this. It all starts with the kids and the participants. That's the story, right? We also had a question. God, I feel like I've been here for a week, but I think it was yesterday during the training, in the initial part was, what's the best word of advice you've ever gotten? And I connected that to the work, not to my life, because that would have been could have sat here all day. But the best word of advice I ever got was from a friend of mine, a founder of an organization called Waves for Water, as I was starting this, he said, just do the work. And as it comes to you, if you want it, it'll be there. You got to start with doing the work. Now, for some of you that are on that beginning phase and you're starting to get overwhelmed with all that stuff, we can talk about that. You know, what does that mean? All that sweat equity, all that time you're giving, it will throw you the other way, right? But if you do the work and if you want it, you can make it happen. I promise you. Like, whether that's 1 day a year, 10 days a year, 50 days a year, whatever it is. If you want it, you can do it. Now, don't get me wrong. If you're giving all your time, it's too much, right? I think it was Chris yesterday said that people, you know, you need to get paid. Eventually, like if you're doing this work, you got to figure out a way to make it happen. And, you know, I never took a sip of water. I lost my train of thought too. Okay. But if you do the work, again, I think it's important to emphasize that if you do the work, whether it's 10 days or 100 days, right? It's magical work. What everybody, I am humbled to be in this room. What everybody is doing in this room, regardless of the population you're serving, regardless of the output that you're having, you are sharing joy, and it's magic. That's what I call it. It's magic, right? Now, tying your story to your mission, super key, right? You got to tie your story to your mission. That's why when I was thinking about this, I tell you my story because it's all connected, right? The story builds connection, right? It builds connection to the importance of why your story matters, right? And it was I was having a brief discussion with Rusty, the smart PhD candidate, and we were talking about defining success, right? Or maybe I brought it up. So there's the immediate success, right? The day of. I mean, we all see that, right? There's the ongoing success, like what does that look like? And then what I was talking with Rusty about is the long-term success, right? And I've seen all of it. And the joy of this is that whether a kid keeps surfing or they keep doing what you're doing with them or it becomes their own, you've opened up their eyes to something that they are aware that there are options out there for them aside from anything they knew before, that they can explore things outside that can provide them joy and also help them heal, right? And it's so important. Okay, so I also wanted to make sure that people can ask questions along the way. I know I'm just talking fast, but I'm open to any and all questions at all times. So when you're talking about your story, and then we're going to talk about where that story goes, whoever's sharing your story needs to be a couple different things, right? Hopefully they understand the story. But they need to be an ambassador for the cause, right? They need to understand it. They need to really understand what the cause is, right? And equally as important to that, they need to be, and this is where the story goes into, we're talking about funders, we're talking about donors, we're talking about grants, we're talking about brands. They need to be able to advocate for the why. Why is it important, the work that you're doing? That wasn't perfect English. Why is the work that you're doing important, right? Like that's it. That's the story, along with also the ambassador piece where somebody can speak to the cause or speak to the experience. You know, the best ambassador, the best advocate, in my opinion, is the kid or the family or the young adult or whatever population. There's no better conduit to the story than that, period, for me. As we're talking about the story again, how is your story being told? So yesterday we had a brilliant presentation on social, what do you call it? Media?
Yeah.
So,
Community boost, like the fundraising.
yeah, community boost?
Yeah, community boost.
Yeah, sorry. But like how that's done, right? But there's many different ways, right, that your story is told. Your website, super important. You know, is your story clear on your website? Like currently, I asked that question, and I know that our story is clear, but you know, it always needs help, right? It always needs little tweaks. It always needs updates. It always needs these things that if somebody's new to your world or the work that you're doing, like, do they go to that? Do they have the most up-to-date story, right? Because the story starts and ideally never finishes, right? It continues to evolve. The story continues to evolve. Like, again, referencing Gnome Surf, their story has continued to evolve. It has continued to move in directions, growth, and same with ours. There's been major mistakes made along the way in the story. You got to own those. You got to be accountable for them. And ideally, those mistakes impact you or your team more than they impact the youth and families that you're serving or adults or participants, let's say, right? Those mistakes, ideally, you're the one that feels them, not the participants. And that's easy to say, but ideally that's, you know, that's how it works. So you have the website, you have social media, right? Social media is super important. You know, ideally, I would hire somebody young to do that. But it's super important. It's a channel that we use in a lot of different ways, you know. I think my hesitance to utilize an external party or somebody else is that if I'm going to be fair, there's a couple different pieces to it. There's a control of it, of the message, worried about what's going out there. You know, does it have enough of the message? Does it have enough of the story? Does it have enough passion? Is it generic? Is it? But anyways, I'm a little bit of a rant there. But that social media piece is super important, right? The story's being told by your executive team. You know, that sounds like a high-level term for maybe some of you. Your founder, myself, like that's a channel for your story to be told. The staff that work with you, right? If you have staff, the volunteers, super important. Like, you know, we have a huge group of volunteers. Our story is told probably best, besides the youth and the families, through the volunteers, through the people who actually, you know, like hearing the story of, you know, Ivan, of like growing up through the program. We have a lot of that through our program, as well as kids who came to the program at like age 9 and at 15. They're like working with us. Mind-blowing what their perspective is. Mind-blowing, right? Like, I can't give that perspective. I can't tell what it was like to like receive this service. There's no way that I could do that. There's no chance. And if I tried, I should be like, somebody should remove me from the room. Another way that your story is told is through your community partners. Like, we work a lot with community organizations, right? Other community-based organizations. We take their kids surfing. They come to us. It's a beautiful thing. You know, we work primarily with kids, foster care kids, kids that come from communities that are trauma impacted. But those kids, those partners can tell the story, again, way better than I can, because they understand it. They get it. They're the ones that are getting the magic.
Eddie,
Yes?
could you give an example of community-based programs that you work with, just so people...
So, I think it's nationwide, but let's just say like the CASA program, right? CASA, Court-Appointed Special Advocates, right? So those are volunteer, amazing humans who volunteer their time to advocate for kids in foster care. And we work with that program across Santa Barbara County, Santa Cruz County, San Mateo County, San Francisco County. But they are able to tell the story because not only there's the youth that's involved, but then you have the advocate that's there, and they see it, and they're watching their kid experience something, and they're getting to share that experience with them. And what story is more beautiful than that, right? Because it's similar to like a family coming out and going camping with us, like never been overnight camping, never been in a tent, never been surfing, and they're setting up their own tent and they're going surfing. You know, like that experience, mind-blowing, again, but You know, I can't speak to that. I don't remember the first time I went camping. I mean, I can't recall that. But, and also, so we work with a lot of community-based organizations. We also go out and pick up kids in the community, like, you know, big, you know, the white van driving through the neighborhoods.
Literally.
Like, you know, get in the van. I mean, that's how, so, hold on, brakes. That's maybe how we used to do it. But no, like you know, so we'll, like a typical day is like we'll have a community-based organization come out with, let's say, 25 kids, and then we'll be picking up kids along the way that are engaged in our program, in our services.
Thank goodness. But you did
We can edit. Yes.
So you operate out of San Francisco, you said?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, we operate out of San Francisco.
San Francisco. Are you familiar with Black Surf Santa Cruz or
I-
Brown Girl Surf?
I'm familiar with both. I have collaborated with Brown Girl Surf. They're one of our partners, you know, community partners. Like if we have excess of gear, it goes to them. If we have excess of wetsuits, it goes to them, or others, you know. And when I say that, I understand that there's privilege attached to what I just said.
But I mean, it's still valuable.
But amazing organizations. I haven't engaged with the Santa Cruz group, but
Actually, they're really good friends of mine. I'm super happy to make an introduction.
yeah.
You'll be here on Friday. They'll be part of the documentary that's
Oh, cool.
screening, so.
Yeah. Yes.
What does, like, after you pick up and stuff, say, and you decide to go on the beach, what does one of your programs look like, start to ending?
That's a good question. Okay, so we've picked them up in the van, not like.
There's a movie.
Um,
So you can't deny it.
So we get to we get to our location, right? We live in Coldwater, so we don't live in Coldwater. Where we live, I got to work on my English. But it's cold year round.
Yeah.
Let's just say. And so we get to the location, and at that point, you know, we kind of greet everybody. The hardest part of our day is getting the kids into wetsuits. I mean, so hands down, like there's, at least from my experience, that's the hardest part of the day. We'll get the kids into wetsuits. You know, a lot of kids haven't worn wetsuits. You know, there's all kinds of challenges with that. Once we do that, we circle up on the beach. You know, we'll kind of go down to the beach and hang, and then we'll get everything organized, and then we'll form a big circle. And within that circle, we're doing, I would call, depending on the group that we're serving, we'll do kind of like a light mindfulness to start things off, right? Like something to bring us all present in the moment, right? And it can be anything, not anything, but it can be, you know, just so that we're checked in and present as to where we are. From there, we will go around the circle and we'll share names and maybe do some sort of a dance or a movement, or we'll do, we kind of mix that up. Something to kind of lighten up the mood, especially for kids who have never been surfing, right? They're already in a wetsuit. They're like, what is this? Who is this guy? He's out of his mind. You know, he's so happy. Like, I don't get it. Yeah, well, and so from there, right, we'll go into like, we will, depending again on, I think with us, we used to really like elongate that circle, like making it like there's a lot of talking, there's a lot of, you know, we're doing environmental stuff, we're doing, you know, because we have to do safety. So but we'll do some stuff like if we know there's something happening currently or with the water, with the tides, we'll talk about tides, we'll talk about safety, we'll talk about who's going to be doing what, who wants to do what. So in the way that we do it is that nobody has to do anything that they don't want to do, right? There's no competitive aspect of what we're doing. Now, obviously, we're working with kids. Competition, it will exist, but we're not setting it up so you have to do this and, you know, Kid wants to go boogie board, let's boogie board. Kid wants to body surf, let's body surf. Kid wants to surf right away, fine. You want to build sandcastles, you want to throw the ball, like so. In that circle, we determine exactly who's going to be doing what, or what their first choice is, and then naturally, and I think I heard Groundswell speak to that, like it's just kind of a progression. And with us, naturally, there's going to be kids that once they get there, they're just fired up. And sometimes those are the kids you got to worry about the most, right? Because a lot of the kids that we serve can't swim, so they have no idea what they're about to get into, and they're just getting ready to go after it. So you got to be really mindful of that. You have to have an awareness. We get an awareness of which kids can swim, and you don't want to do that in a way that's like, who can't swim, because that's, that doesn't work. So you're asking more leading questions about like, who's worried about swimming, like, any questions that come up, and sometimes naturally that'll happen, like, hey, I can't swim, I'm worried about swimming. From there we do a safety talk that has to do with real basic stuff, right? It has to do with like, we're not going out that far. We're going to be within this zone. We're not going to go outside of the waves. When you fall down, when you go underwater, what do? Right? Close your mouth. Let's start there, right? And the kids, you tell them that nobody's been able to, it's never been proven that somebody can breathe underwater, and the kids like that. Just little things. Like you're trying to, I mean, some of the stuff just comes out, but you're trying to infuse humor as well into, because there can be a lot of fear, right? There can be a lot of anxiety. There can be a lot of like, again, like who is this? What is going on right now? I'm in this suit, it's hot. So we really try to like simplify that in a way though that isn't overly, like we're not trying to, we might do some gentle coaxing, like, oh, you could do it, but that's it. It's not like, you're going to do this, And then from there, what we do is we'll partner kids up. If it's their first time, they're working with somebody for sure. If there's not, some kids just grab the board, they go out there, and they're doing their thing. Did that answer any questions? Yeah.
How do you end?
How do we end? Ideally with a circle. Ideally with a circle. But when you're dealing with 40 kids, coming from different places, that can be hard. Okay, time to circle up. Everyone's like, I'm out of here. But, because everybody's on a tight schedule, so we try and do that. And then that's where a lot of the magic, because that's, for me, like that's where you hear and see, like, oh my God, like da, 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 da. And I've shared this before, and a lot of people in the room have probably experienced this, but in the work that I've experienced, the kids that show up and they're like, bruh, like I ain't doing all that, or whatever.
Too cool for school.
Like too cool for school. Those are the kids that we most of the time have to pull out of the water at the end of the day, right? And that's so. I mentioned the kids that show up and they're too anked, they're too fired up, and those are the kids you got to worry about, to me, right? Because there's no fear, and they're just like, whoa, you got to worry about those kids, but it's those kids that show up and they're like, man, I ain't doing it. I got a really funny story. I'll just do it real quick. So this kid, he shows up, and he's got his fit, he's got his outfit, everything's going on for him, and everybody's in wetsuits, and he's like, I ain't doing all that. I'm not doing that. I was like, so I asked him, like, we got everybody. We're finally ready to go to the beach. And I'm like, look, are you 100% sure that you don't want a wetsuit, right? Because it's a little trek down to the beach, and he's 100%. I'm like, you're not 99.999% sure that you don't, that you don't want a wetsuit? And so he's like, I'm sure, right? So we go down to the beach, we do everything. It's like 20 minutes into it, and I'm out of the water. I'm like doing something, and I get this tap on my shoulder, right? It's the boy, and he's like, I should have said 99.999, And And the coolest thing was like, again, that was a kid that like at the end of the day, he like paddled, he didn't listen to any of the rules. He's like paddling out. We had to go out and get him. He surfed on his own, first time ever in the water. He was catching waves on a 9-foot soft top that is impossible to ride. It's like this wide. And he was surfing on his own. So, good stuff. Okay, sorry, I'm getting, there was one other question I saw.
It's a little sidetracked.
That's okay. Welcome to my world.
It's actually a question that I kind of wanted to ask Noam too, so I think it ties in. So I think it's beautiful the way your organization is set up and how in the beginning you spoke about being aware and sympathizing and understanding. And for me as a surfer of color, one of the biggest things that really affected me and allowed me to even be in a space like this today is representation.
Yep.
So you spoke about working with these other organizations, but you're very volunteer based. You have a lot of volunteers of color. Do you introduce the kids to surfers of color? I know on the West Coast there's like Hunter Jones, Mikey February's out there. Are they getting those experiences? Because yesterday Noam said they have the younger kids, like I think his name is Ivan, and he inspires them to see that they can reach that and they can be paid for what they're doing.
Yeah.
And do these kids have someone that they can look up to? I saw a black female surfer and she was shaking a board. And I remember seeing that and being like, I want to do that. And then I got the opportunity and it blew my mind.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't have ever thought that I could even do that without seeing it. Right. So do
Yeah.
they have those chances? Is that like there?
Yes. Yes, and it needs, there's never going to, from my perspective, based on what you just asked me and shared, there's never going to be enough of that, right? Ever. I mean, and as a white leader, I say that with full, I mean, like, gives me goosebumps to say that. Our volunteer base is, there are women of color, men of color, and it's just a wide variety, right? But we're not out there, you know, it's you know, we have we're really lucky in that sense. The best way that that's represented within our organization are kids that started with the program and then end up coming either, first, I mean, it's the same process, like you got to volunteer first, let's see what you got, and if you want to get into it, then you're hired. That's the best way because then the kids see people that are essentially like they can identify with, right? Because it doesn't matter, again, how many times for me I say something or whatever. You see somebody, a kid that like he can say like I was you 6 years ago. Like I couldn't swim or surf either. Now look at me, you know? And there's no better way to do that. And I think youth mentorship, within our program, there's never going to be enough of that as well. Like, I mean, ideally, a youth would take my job that came from the program.
Yeah. Can I part to that? Have you had any of your youth that have transitioned so far?
Transitioned.
That have gone from like a mentee to a mentor?
Yes.
Or,
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah. Big time. Yeah.
Also, can I just answer really quick that question? So City Surf Project serves right around MeWater Foundation, and I'm sure you guys know City Surf Project, but they also collaborate with Brown Girl Surf, and they also work with Mikey February, they work with all the guys, and so it's also a matter of their time too, right? But I think that surf therapy programs, I mean, I'd like to believe we are inclusive in the sense of the populations we're serving. It's a natural, like, it's inclusion in the sense of we're the ones, I mean, I'm a person of color, but we're showing that everybody belongs in water. And how are we getting more of these, the BIPOC community, LGBTQIA community, people who live in wheelchairs, how are we getting people in the water so that others can see them and know that, oh my gosh, if I see that, I can do that. And I agree with you. It would have served me well to see Hawaiian, Filipino women being leaders in any way, shape, or form, which I've never seen growing up in my time. So I love that you guys are asking these questions, and thank you for being so representative in the room. We're really appreciative.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Please ask any question, even if you think it's difficult or if it's challenging, or especially for those of you in the room that are beginning and are struggling maybe with the steps. Yes?
I have a question for the people that have programs that have had mentees going to mentors. 'Cause our mentees haven't had mentors that look like them
Yep.
yet, and we're giving them opportunities to become that, but they haven't taken the opportunity because they haven't seen it. And we're like,
All it takes
take this opportunity,
all it takes is one.
you know, but like,
Just keep
any input of how to make them, please do. That's why I'm asking the question.
This is my mentor right there too. When I first started, Suri doesn't look like me, obviously. But when I first started, it was like pandemic season, and I remember thinking like, maybe I want to model, because she is a professional model. And I remember we got out, and she immediately like swooped me under her wing. And it's not about like, with things like that, representation does matter, yes, but it's not 100% representation. You really have to, like a lot of people were saying, it's about the kids, the stoke. So get them more stoked about what it is that they want to do instead of who it is that they're going to do it with. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, we're going to go surf with this person, and instead of like, oh, we're surfing with this person, it's like, we're going to go surf, the waves are like this, it's going to be so lit, da da da. And when they're more excited about surfing than who they're surfing with, that won't matter as much. We're still learning and getting that opportunity and chance.
We're definitely surfing with them lots. We want to have them grab the opportunity that we're giving them to become the instructors of the group. But that's the part where we haven't gotten there.
I think a lot of it is like emotional connection as well. So I started with Laura Bea, but before I was in the same community, but like did not have access to the community. I was like alone for years in this community that we're all a part of. And eventually someone pushed me to meet them, but it was a lot of them just like sitting with me being like, come on, come do this with us outside of surfing. So it's like build the relationship in the water and then on land, and then show them what you're doing, bring them a part of it, make them a part of it, like shadowing, being like, oh, this is a part of our programming. And then they're interested, and then they're invested, and then they're like, hey, I might want to do this, like maybe because they just want to spend more time with you, you know, but they want to do it.
I totally agree. Yeah, that was great, Autumn. But I totally agree with both Farmy and Autumn. I would say the best way I found to kind of inspire those mentees to go to the next level has just been providing them a lot of value, kind of what that is for them. So some people will need kind of their career aspirations and just go from there. They'll say, hey, I like hanging out with you, I'll do more. Or you know, if you want to surf with them, if you want to surf with them, or if you like kind of make them feel like they're part of your group.
Yeah.
That social kind of collection that people find value from that, I think. And then the best way really I found is offering people money at the end of the day.
Well, money talks, right?
Even a little bit of money.
Yeah, sure.
It has to be like big market rates that they might deserve. But you know, even just kind of communicating to them that if you join as a mentor, you'll gain skills in kind of your personality and in your surf instruction. And you can kind of leverage for money. Even that alone is valuable. But paying them directly is the best way I found to make sure they show up on time, they're excited, and they want to do it more.
Yeah.
That's what I found.
Make sure they're dreaming big too. It's like, you start as an instructor, but then boom, you have your own school, and you're like, no, Costa Rica, Bali, you're doing this, you're doing that, and it's all you, and you started as an instructor.
So Farmy has a whole kind of instruction business.
I got trained.
So I'm going to keep going here just so, no, all good. I did see hands raised, and so my advice would be if you're raising your hand about that discussion, please follow up with the people that were speaking, because I think that's a really important discussion to happen. Okay, so how's your story being told? Sidetracked. That's the story of my life. If you have a board, if you have a functioning board, is your board telling your story, right? We haven't talked a lot. I didn't hear a lot yesterday about the board. Your board should be telling that story and should be nailing it. Your board should be a sounding board for your story. They should be out there doing things that you are unable to do because you're working your ass off and you are doing the work. Okay, the board is important. Now, we can get into this big discussion about board, but we're not going down that rabbit hole. But ideally, and then for those of you that are small and in full transparency in the truth tree, our board has just really started to function and started, I'm finally in the process.
Tell them how long.
Huh?
How many years has it taken to get a working board?
Oh, you're throwing me under the bus.
Just trying to give them
Well, it's been since 2015. Remember the legal check we got? Thanks for that, though. Okay, so
full disclosure.
yeah, truth tree. We're in the truth tree.
I'm in 2008, and I'm still trying to get a good functioning, all members of our board
Yeah.
really working hard for what we're doing.
So this in essence is a session in itself. This topic right here, hands down. Not 90 minutes, 90 hours. Okay. Another way that your story is being told, and some of the reason that I'm here today is to talk about brands. Are there brands that can tell your story? Right? Some of you might be like, what? No, or, absolutely. And we'll talk a little bit about that. My favorite way to tell, again, I've said this already, but my favorite way for the story to be told is through our community partners, youth, and families. That is, for me, because that's where it matters. That's what it's all about. And your story builds connection, right? And with connection comes ideally a relationship, and within that relationship is trust, right? And now I'm morphing more into, funding and stuff, because our program is free all the time, no matter what. So funding, if there's no funding, there's no program. There's never a charge, right? We take kids 2 weeks camping and whatever it is, all the food, everything, all of it's free. So these discussions have to happen for us. Otherwise, it just doesn't exist. I tried doing it. I didn't mention that and this is I've picked up on this a little bit, but for 4 years or maybe even 5 years, I held this super stressful position in a nonprofit mental health facility and was doing this work. And at some point, something's got to give. Has to. The sweat equity, if you're doing it for free, there is no sweat equity. There's just time, right? And everybody needs a life. Everybody needs to be able to also have their own, care. They're taking care of their own selves. So, I forgot to mention all that. Another way that your story can be told is, do organizations here have a deck, like a deck that tells their story? Yes. Good. Good and, yes.
Can you explain that?
So a deck is like, let's say it's a PowerPoint. It can be anywhere from however many slides you need to tell your story, right? You can send that out. Right? It's shareable. I could sit up here right now. Basically what people, the way that a lot of the stuff's been presented has been on a deck, right? So, you're able to go speak to donors, or you can send it to donors, or, hey, do you have a deck? Sure, here you go. Now, some people might say it's a waste of time. For me, no. It's not, right? And as we get into discussion about connecting with brands, a brand will want to see a deck. I would almost guarantee, unless you're able to intertwine weave your way in through to the brand with somehow differently. Most brands that would be one of the first things. Or some sort of funder that's different, like a foundation, would like to see a deck, things like that.
So you usually start with your deck and then you connect personally with them afterwards?
Okay, so I'm going to get into that. Yeah, we can talk about that. But my way of doing things, from my experience, has been personal first. Relationships, right? Patience in that. The word no doesn't mean no. It just means not this year. Not yet, right? Even no, I mean, the only no that really means no is no, please don't contact me again. Yeah, can I unsubscribe from you, the person? And within the deck, world of decks, right, you might have a donor deck, right, that's specific for donors, right? You might have a brand deck that's specific for even that brand. Like, why does this make sense for your brand to support, this organization? I think, and all of that really is cutting and pasting and some different, once you get kind of the template, you can kind of be like doing stuff like that. Or you don't have to, but those are ideas. And so within all of that, relationship and trust is everything when it comes to, first and foremost, your participants, right? Your community partner, like that's it. Like relationship and trust. If there's no relationship, there's no trust, and then it's not happening, right? And if it is, it's sketchy and it's not sustainable. Question?
Yes, sorry. So on the deck question, you said tell your story. Do you also, because a lot of part of our deck that we also have to explain a lot of what surf therapy is and give a lot of the clinical background. Do you suggest that in the deck as well, or more of our story of why we started this nonprofit?
So it depends on where that deck's landing. I'll tell you, that's why I kind of mentioned like brand deck, donor deck, like a foundation, like a donor for like a private foundation. You're probably going to have a lot more data, and I'm going to speak a little bit about this, but you're going to have a lot more of like numbers, outcomes, things like that. Whereas like in a brand deck, it's going to be more of a storytelling. Right? And how does that story connect potentially with this brand? Right? How would the brand see themselves part of that story? Whereas as a donor, if it's something like that, and you're trying to advocate for the efficacy of surf therapy, right? You're going to include you're going to load that thing up. Right? So I think it's important to differentiate the difference. And really, once you get that deck that goes to the donor that has all, you're just, at that point, you're able to tell your story. You're simply like removing slides. Because you still want your story included in that, right? Maybe it's not as detailed. But like being able to present, how are we doing on time? Okay, I have an interesting story. So we were a finalist for a grant that it's a 3-year grant. There's monetary support included in it, and of $25,000 a year, and then there's 3 years of mentorship and a full kind of wrapping their arms around your organization. We made it to the final, like as one of the finalists. There was 8 total finalists. The last part of the process was I had to deliver a 4-minute presentation with 10 slides telling the story why. 4 minutes. Now, I get sidetracked super easy if you can't tell. I'm a little bit all over the place. 4 minutes, there's no way we're going to get that, right? This organization, it's an amazing organization, Bay Area based. They paid for a pitch coach for 2 sessions to help me. Okay, so I did that, right? Okay. The first time I tried to do the deck on my own, 8 minutes. 8 minutes. That is effed up, like twice the time. And I'd already worked with the coach. There's no way, right? Okay, check it out. I got it down to like 4:15. I don't know how, and we got the grant. And all of that was internal for me. Like I just needed to figure it out, right? Because there was 4 minutes of content in that 10 slides, but I needed to not get I needed to be able to deliver it, not get sidetracked, focus on the story, focus on, don't get all, And I think that's important to share because you can do it. You have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in the story. The story is everything, right? It really is. I saw a hand. No? Okay, never mind. Okay, so relationship and trust. I mentioned that for me, it really starts with the participants, but it's also with your funders, right? There has to be like, and again, like we're a free program. The donors, I mean, we can go on and on about that. With grants, I know there's a lot of programs that are starting out, and I know if you're outside of the United States, it's a different world. Obviously, I mean, literally, but like also within that funding stream, right? But it's super important to build, like the person that's reviewing your grant, sure, like there's not like a real relationship, but there is, right? You need to be able to answer their questions that come along the way. The person that reviews your grant, the grant manager as well, like along the way, you need to stay in connection with that person. You need to be honest with that person. You need to build trust with that person so that if you screw up, right, it's not like the sky is falling. So that person, there's some trust there. Like, look, I messed up. I didn't meet the expectation for this. And what do I need to do? Yes?
Is there some sort of like impact evaluation that you do to keep your donors engaged? And if so, is it quarterly or monthly reporting?
Good question. What was the first part of the question? You asked, is there some...
Is there some sort of like evaluation, impact evaluation in place where...
No. So the answer to that is no. The newsletter that we send out has just, it updates both financial and output and outcomes. But no, we do not have that. We should. I'm going to ask you again to tell me what those words were so I know.
I was just going to say, for us, we do it at the end of each program cycle because we do surf therapy, skate therapy, and I'm introducing free diving as well.
Oh.
But to speak, can I just say something?
Please, you want to come up here?
I want to say something, right? I feel like, and I could be wrong, but please give me the space and freedom to say this. I think a lot of the times we get caught up with, we're doing all this work. We're doing good work. Please sponsor us. Please help us. When I think we should be looking at the company or the potential sponsors we're engaging, we should be looking at it like, what can I bring to this organization? What can I bring to you as a sponsor? What can I give to you in return? I think that's important.
Yeah, I'll talk about that. So we're...
Thank you.
So yeah, you're so welcome. Hey, the best thing about this whole experience from my perspective is that I am humbled to be here first and foremost, to be up here standing, but also to learn. Like, like the fact that you mentioned that, I'm just kind of like, I mean, it's also bandwidth, like, like the board should do that. Okay. Okay, so relationship and trust as well with the brands, right? Okay, so, we have some pretty solid brand support. And that is a two-way street. That's just not like, here's some money, here's some product, have at it. I'm constantly asking, to your point, what can we be doing better to represent your support, right? And the coolest thing about it, and and I don't say this, it's going to sound privileged in a lot of different ways, is that the fact that I ask so constantly, like I don't get like this is, you need to be doing this. It's just like you're doing the work, and those are the brands, those are the people that you want to connect with. You're doing the work, and that's enough. Now, that's going to sound somewhat elitist to a certain perspective, and I'm being honest, but those are the brands that care, and that brand could be a supermarket that serves organic cherries and gives you 3 pounds on Saturdays, to like a brand, a huge brand that gives you some product and 10 grand a year, right? It's the same process, right? Yes?
Quick question. So can you like quickly walk us through a case study maybe of one of the brands that you've been able to, garner this kind of support from, and kind of take us through how you engaged them, was there any difficulty, any challenges, and then kind of how it all played out, and if they're still kind of a brand that you're interested or working with today?
Sure. So we're supported, yeah, okay, so I'll give you, it's going to be, it might not be the answer that you're looking for, but so we've had support from Patagonia for quite some time, right? Patagonia is an excellent brand in the world of support and not expecting anything back. Hands down, just that is a fact, right? They're not in it to be representing something like optically, right, in their ads. Like that's not, however, my relationship with Patagonia has spanned 15 years, like on a personal level, and if I'm going to be honest about it, which we're in the truth tree, right, that financial support has only started in the last 2 or 3 years. So you have to nurture, you have to have, so the bigger the brand, the more time it takes, right? Because they don't have to do any of this, right? They don't have to support you, And the cool thing about it is that within all of that, right, you nurture the relationship, right? And within that relationship, like you do what you say you're going to do, and if they're doing what they say they're going to do, that's the best kind of relationship, right? Sure, in the back of your mind, you're like, fuck, it'd be great if you could give me 25 grand on top of those 25 backpacks, right? But you have to have patience in that realm. But the key to that is the relationship, right? And hopefully I'll get to it, but it's the small, like, I'll also talk about the surf industry, and unfortunately the camera's going to be rolling, but we'll get there. Yeah, okay, so we've got 20-something minutes. Okay, so your story should always be the same, but it's presented or shared differently, right? Depending on where it's going. Your donors, right, what do your donors want? Anybody? Chris, what do your donors want?
They want to see the impact that you create.
They want to see the impact. They want to see the connection. They want to see the outcomes. They might want to see some data. They certainly want to see some photos and some videos, right? Your donors, like, that's just, right? With the grants, it's different, right? Different language, data, output. I'm going to ask a question for those of you that are either established or working. Do you have a dedicated grant writer?
Yes.
Okay. So if you do, you're 17 steps ahead of me, like where I was in the beginning. So it is so vitally important that you remove yourself, if you can, unless you have some extraordinary skill of grant writing, which I don't. I mean, I'll give myself a little bit of credit. I was able to get 2 grants in the beginning. One for like 15 grand, the other for like 26 grand. 26, and I thought, so that 26 grand, that was the first, it was the first time I got paid in this work. And that was it, right? I was able to say, okay, like, it can do it. That was the last grant I wrote, because it took me probably 3 months. I mean, not 3 months, but it took me forever. And I think it was kind of a pity award. I think it was like, but the best decision that I've made, and this was with some board support, yes, was to hire a dedicated grant writer. And however you can pull that off, if you can, do it, right? Because that person has a skill set that, well, maybe, again, I don't want to make it, maybe there's people in the room that could nail a grant in 20 seconds. It's the grant language, but it's also a bandwidth thing, right? If you disconnect, like I review the grants, but I mean, I'm not, I'm just like, okay, well, maybe, this or that, And you don't want to, I was talking to, I think, Kelsey and Michelle about this. You don't want to have to feed the passion to your grant writer, right? Your grant writer's got to get it. It's so important. Your grant writer's got to be like, this is fucking magic, and here's why. In grant language, not in my language, in grant language, because it's so key, right? And it can go you can go really far with that. I mean, we've been able to secure grant support that provides some sustainability for us because of that choice, So do it. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about brands. Brands want a story. Brands want the optics. They want they want the photos. They want to be able to. But if your story, it goes back to your original story. They want that story shown through the pictures, right? Shown through the video. If you can get a brand to make a video on your program, yes, there you go, right? And again, that can be the fucking supermarket that made a video about, kids, like whatever. It doesn't have to be like, you have to think realistically about where you're at with your program and what brands you're using, but never forget it, never lose sight of that larger dream of like, that would be so cool. But your story has to connect to that brand's kind of identity, right? It has to. So it's all the same story, but a different approach. All focused, again, I'm going to keep on repeating this, all focused, again, on building that connection, relationship, and the trust, right? I have trust with the brands that I work with because of the relationship. Because if they say they're going to do something and they do it, and I say I'm going to do something and I do it, that's the trust. Yes. It's like in any relationship, right? Honey, I'm going to go do this. Okay, that's what you did. Amazing. Yes.
So I have a question about reaching out to brands. I know obviously a big brand is going to be much harder to get a hold of.
Yep.
But, I'm thinking like I've sent emails and I do not back down, right? I'm the most annoying.
Yep.
I will email you 100 times.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, if it's a big brand, if it's a medium-sized brand,
Yep.
I feel like it's just going to get lost or it's not going to get seen. How do you really even?
I'll talk about that a little bit. A little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. So when I started this, I was like, no worries. Assumption, like the brands are gonna, I'll get all kinds of support, right? No brainer. Like who wouldn't want to support a program like this? And it's true, but it's totally false, right? Like, because what does support really mean? Does support mean like we're going to send you some backpacks and that's amazing? Yes. But is that the support that you need, right? So you have to be able to identify what your need is first and foremost. Like obviously, if you're talking to a large brand, you're going to be like, yeah, I want 100K, or whatever it is. You're going to say something, like that. In the beginning days, again, like I made assumptions that like brands would want to support, and that didn't work out. And what I've learned is that ultimately and most importantly, you want to partner with brands that actually care about what you're doing. And what does that mean? What does care mean? It means that there's a relationship. It doesn't mean that they're going to send you, like we need wetsuits, right? We have to have wetsuits. This is going to tap into a little bit of a little negative thing on the surf industry, but like I'd rather have a brand that I pay 40% off for wetsuits than a brand that sends me, but that brand for 40% off, like I have a relationship with them. They might put something on social media. They might, do little things. Like that matters. Then the brand that's going to send me 60% off, no contact, it's just a little code. Like, to me, that matters. And I think that reflects as well in the long term. I think that that's really important to me. Like, I've learned that that's important. Like, 60% off, I mean, I'm not a mathematician, is way better than 40% off. But it builds, there's no relationship there. There's no connection. Like, Rip Curl, I did it. Rip Curl doesn't give a you-know-what about what we're doing, but 60% off anytime. And to me, that's not enough. When I started it, absolutely. Actually, when I started it, I needed free wetsuits, right? You needed people to donate them. And that's the best. That is the best, like, to me. But, you know, that only runs a certain, you know, you can't rely on that, right? Because, you know, when you start a program or every year people give you wetsuits, like, that's great. But, you know, at a certain point, you reach a certain level, and you know, you want your kids to be in nice, warm wetsuits. It's important. Okay. To your point, the question about, I'm going to dive a little bit into it, but, you know, as you're building a relationship with any brand, you know, you want to do it with whoever you can within that brand once you've, like, this is assuming you've already made some sort of contact. I have a really cool story. There's a guy that worked in shipping for one of the brands that we're connected with, right? And somehow he was on an email that had something to do with something we were receiving, and he was like, hey, I've seen your work, it's super cool. And so I started emailing with him. Anyways, that guy in shipping, like 2 years later, was in one of the upper offices, right? I don't know, that's a quick transformation for go from shipping to, but you want to, it was pretty rad because, like, leadership changes, people leave and stuff. And so the person that I was in contact with was gone, right? Just gone. My boy in shipping, he was sending us free stuff all of a sudden, right? So you want to have the eyes and ears of anyone you can within a brand, without being like, hey, what's your supervisor? Or, you know, without, like, becoming too contrived or too forced. But, like, hey, you know, is there anybody that I could talk to in this certain department? You know, you can make shit up. You could say, you know, I want to talk about this wetsuit design, and I don't know. And next thing you know, you got a dialogue with, you know, with Jane in wetsuit, you know, and you've got another relationship, another connection. Now, this might seem a little bit like, and what I'm telling you is that's important. You know, it's important. Because nobody in this room, and I think this is important, nobody in this room should be paying retail for anything. I mean, period, right? And so now I'm going to talk a little bit about and anything that's related to running your program is what I'm saying. Not for anything, you know. But I mean, I agree with you. I'm with you on that. Yeah, because so I use social media for, like, to reach out to brands. Not big brands. But for example, like, there's this, I mean, I have a lot of examples of this. Every aspect of our program is covered by some sort of brand that has either given us free stuff or that we're, you know, we have a, you know, from being under contract with big brands to being, like, getting some stuff. Now, for example, like, I saw this thing on, like, somewhere, social media probably, of this, like, basketball court called U-Ball that goes on the beach, and it's, like, collapsible. And I was like, that looks insane. Like, we could have that after lunch, you know, da-da-da. I reached out to him, social media, one message. You know, not asking for free, just, hey, do you guys provide discounts to nonprofits? You know, this is the program. Tell them the story. And this is all, like, on message, you know. Tell the story. The reply was, your program looks incredible. We would love to send you 2 for free. Wow. Now, does that always work? No. In my experience, based on the fact that, like, you know, we have the output, we have it on social media, you can see what we're doing, it's very clear. You know, it's run by an old person, but there's still some messaging there that you can kind of understand the story, right? That it's well received. And I've had that with multiple multiple brands that, they're not bigger brands. They might just be starting their brand. This brand was doing that. And then what do I do within that? After getting that, I build a relationship, send them photos, do little things. And they didn't ask for that, right? They don't, they were like, hey, your kids, this is, and the best thing about it is that the kids loved it, right? They're playing basketball on the beach, they're doing slam dunks, they're making their own videos, they're tagging the brand, whatever, all that stuff. So email. If you're going to email a brand, you got to figure out who you're emailing, right? How do you get somebody's email? Now, I've got something written down here, like from a networking perspective. I don't care if it's a friend of an uncle's friend's aunt. Like maybe somebody knows somebody within that sector, within that brand, maybe. And you can get their email and you have some sort of touch point. It's all about the touch point, right? Like, how do I make the connection with that brand that, the uncle, sister, all that stuff, maybe that's a little much, but like, hey, I'm a friend, or hey, I saw this, or anything. And if you're not afraid to say no, to hear no, what do you got to lose? Nothing, right? It's all in the ask. Like, you want to build, you want to do that however you can. So, what brands make sense, right? For our organization, the Patagonia thing makes sense in just so many different ways. And that was a natural progression of relationship, friendships as well. That was a lucky. I'm going to be just fair and transparent about that. It was a lucky one for us, but it's blossomed and it continues to because it's a relationship. It's not, and that's important to share. We also have support from Yeti, who makes coolers, right? And whatever else they make, all the different things. All of a sudden we all needed a cooler, but Yeti makes sense, right? But you do actually. What did I do before all this? It's incredible. But Yeti makes sense for what we're doing, right? We're taking kids camping outside, first-time experience. You only need, how many coolers? You don't need, those things are bulletproof. And the coolest thing is, too, is that it makes sense for them, right? Like, of course, it's easy to say what brands make sense for you, right? You could be like, yeah, well, I don't know, it makes sense to get $1 million from whoever. But you want to be able to connect with the brands that it makes sense for them too, right? It all connects. The story connects. They can intertwine the story into what, and it doesn't, it's, when I say that, it's not in the sense of like, they're using you for advertising to show that they're doing certain kind of things. That's not what I'm talking about. That to me, I see your hand. That to me is, I've experienced that and I've shut it down and I no longer exist with those brands. Because of the request, because of what I could see, the intention was behind the expectation. Like, we want you to be doing this so that it shows this. Like, that's not going to work. That is not what this is about. Now, if you would have said that to me, I wouldn't have said that to you 5 years ago. I'd have been like, okay, I'll do that, I'm going to be honest. I wouldn't have had the integrity but all of that is through learning and many different mistakes, along the way. Yes, the question. Oh, you and me.
I wanted to just express the importance of us as a community also to influence brands.
Yes.
We are connected to the ocean. We are responsible for our planet and the state that it's in, and we can give back to them input about perhaps packaging, sustainability, and really serve a purpose as well as a community way that we start influencing brands too.
Yeah, I mean, that's an amazing point you've made. So thanks for holding that thought or question. I think that's it. That's everything, right? That you would want a brand to not just be like, yeah, here's whatever the resources that they're providing, but they're also like. That's why I say that they understand, that they get it, that it's influencing what they're doing and how they're operating and what they're focused on, and yeah, I think that's just so important. Yes.
25 years or something ago, I was in marketing myself.
You should be up here helping me then.
That's the thing that I'm telling you. When I was in the sports marketing, it was for a brand like O'Neill, and my job was to tell the story of the company. And from what I see last couple of years, especially since I need money for our foundation, is that marketing is driven to sales-driven marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that change as well? Because
I
couldn't tell the story about O'Neill, Rip Curl, Quicksilver, whatever. I don't know their story anymore. Because it's like, boom.
Yeah.
All over the place, but it's always sales-driven. Like all the Instagram ads I see is always sales-driven.
Right.
I don't know the stories anymore.
Yeah.
That's true.
Well, I'm not going to be careful here, but I think you're speaking to this, the perspective of where the surf industry is as well.
Just about your experience.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I don't know if I have anything like. My whole experience has just been like learn along the way. If I'm going to be fair and transparent about it, like with many mistakes along the way, things I thought would work just completely backfired. Things that I didn't think would work completely flourished. Like yesterday the mention of. And I don't think I'm answering your question, but yesterday the mention of like end of year giving. So last year somehow at the end of the year, our end of year giving was just pretty significant, like not crazy significant, but I was working with some sort of consultant through that grant that I told you I have, kind of mentors that they're like, oh, what kind of end of year giving campaign did you do or do you do? And I was like, no, I didn't do anything. And they're like, well, how'd it go? And I'm like, and I told them the number, and they were like, what the how did you, so like, I don't necessarily have a pulse on all on what you're talking about. Most of my efforts have just been like an organic process of trial and error and trusting some, and getting feedback, even from the board. The board can be a sounding board for that. That's a good question. I don't know that I have the answer. Yes.
Just for some clarity, so working with brands, are most of them like, are they reaching out to you, or do you know them and happen to nurture that relationship like that? Or are you meeting them at
So,
kind of event?
I mean, yeah. So that's a really good question, and I'm glad you're asking it because there's a certain privilege that I have with the Patagonia experience because it already existed like as a surfer, as like a brand tester, right? But that doesn't mean shit if it's not a relationship, if you've blown it, or there's just if there's a split, right? The Yeti thing happened like I happened to be on a beach in Santa Barbara running a surf camp, and the Yeti West Coast dude was there, saw it, and was like, what is this? And I was like, here's what it is. Other brands, I've done the outreach, or I've done the things that I've talked to you about. I've asked friends, hey, do you know somebody at this? Right? And in San Francisco, we don't even, I've got 1 minute. In San Francisco, we don't live in the, it's not a surf industry place, but that doesn't mean that there's not a way to connect to like, the things that are happening, right? It's effort. It's the unwavering effort that like no doesn't mean no, right? And there's one There's one other thing that, in regards to brands, that I want to share. It's connected to the no doesn't mean no. Remember that brands, just like any business, have a fiscal budget, right? So, and this plays out, and I think even Marguerite from South Africa is here. She could probably speak a little bit. The realities of just because it didn't happen this year doesn't mean it's not going to happen next year. And because somebody tells you, and some of it could be bullshit. Somebody tells you, oh, we don't have that in our budget this year. That could be total BS. Or it could be the actual truth. That, next year we could look at trying to put that into our budget. So don't give up. That's it.